Welcome, everybody, to the Only Podcast. This is Chris Vannini, your host. I'm joined by Austin Smith, and we've got a Big Ten tournament preview edition of the Only Podcast up for you. Dom, how are you doing on this?
Dom.
Man. I did this before, didn't I? I did this a few
that
weeks
slap
ago.
in the face.
You know what? It's because we were talking about off before we went on air. We were talking about other possible people on the podcast based on certain things. So that's why Dom was in my head.
I'm trying not to get offended. You know, Dom's a guy and all, but I'm just joking. I'm good, man. You know, we're hitting like what usually is for us anyway, one of the absolute best times of the year with March Madness and everything right around the corner. Like you said, Big Ten tournament this week. So it's pretty, you know, as dicey as things look right now, it's still pretty exciting.
You know, if you think about it, MSU could have MSU has a minimum of 2 games left theoretically. I mean, there could be 2 games left in the season, which kind of put things in perspective. Man, it is ever since I got into Big Ten play, it feels like it is absolutely every time flown by. Every time football fully ends, it feels like basketball really speeds up. So MSU will play on Thursday around 2:30, 3 o'clock Eastern against the winner of Penn State, Nebraska. That game will be on BTN. Penn State, Nebraska play at 4:30 on Wednesday, which is probably the day you're listening to this. So our preview later on in the episode will be brief and about each team because we don't know who it's going to be. And if we recorded this Wednesday night, there'd be barely any time between that and the game itself. So, but before we do that, we're going to look back at the last 2 games real quick. MSU goes on the road for 2, loses at Illinois by 3, loses at Maryland by 3, both down to the final seconds. Both kind of felt like every MSU road game this year, pretty much. And I don't know. I didn't see the Maryland game, actually. I was at Six Flags here in Texas for the first time. But I followed it on Twitter. I saw the end. I kind of got the gist, I think. But for the Illinois game, Austin, MSU starts off pretty strong. They get a lead. And then John Gross gets a technical foul. And that kind of changed everything. Illinois goes on a huge run. They get the lead, big lead. And I don't think they gave it up the rest of the way. And MSU comes up just short. Miles Bridges misses a difficult layup late. Nairn misses a half-court heave. And Illinois was looking on the right side, looking on the bubble there until they lost to Rutgers. But what were your thoughts from the Illinois game?
Yeah, I think you kind of nailed it. It was pretty similar to a lot of the other road games, especially, and we'll get to it, but it was very similar to the Maryland game to me. But, you know, Michigan State is cruising early, but the starters in. Illinois can't really slow down Nick Ward or Miles Bridges. They're shooting it fairly well from the outside. Alvin Ellis had another 15-point game. But what happened to them is when the bench comes in, John Gross gets that technical foul. Illinois just goes absolutely nuts, starts hitting threes all over the place. They only ended up making 11 threes on the game, but it sure felt like more.
It was something like 7 or 8 in the first half.
Right. They just went crazy. LeRon Black, who I think had made somewhere in the single digits or very few less than that.
21%, I think, on the year.
Right. Just like Jayshawn Tate goes and nails that huge 3 on the road at Ohio State against Michigan State. LeRon Black lights them up 3 for 5 from downtown on senior night there. I was a little worried going into this game that the fact that Illinois was playing really solid defense and turning their opponents over a lot would come back to bite Michigan State, turn them over 15 times. And so that definitely came to light. And also the fact that they're a team loaded with seniors. They were playing on their home floor for the last time. And 5 of their 6 seniors are significant, minute chewers for the Illini. So I think it all sort of came to a head when they went on this big run in the first half. And then really Michigan State made a huge run out of the gate in the second half. Actually, they
Mhm.
kind of had a miracle cutting it to 6 at halftime to begin with because they
Yeah.
scored 2 really late baskets on one bonehead turnover. They actually, I think they may have taken a 1-point lead early in the second half, but then the wheels fell off. Again, had kind of corresponded with the bench coming in. It just speaks to the lack of functional depth on this team. It's been a season-long issue. It's not surprising. But it came back and bit them. And Illinois they didn't even play well down the stretch. They just played a little hungrier. And I kind of take a little bit of issue, and this is, again, kind of folds into the Maryland thing at the same time. And really, it's a season-long thing where Izzo, when these big, you can tell he's used to having more talent. And he's used to having guys on the bench that are at least able to stem the tide and keep leads from ballooning, which is why he doesn't call timeout. He doesn't call timeouts when things get raucous on the road. Illinois they were fired up. That arena was loud a couple different times when they were going on these long runs.
Yeah.
And Izzo just let his guys learn. I mean, that's the type of thing that down the line, maybe in a year, you look back and say, this is, they've been through this. Maybe they can pull themselves out of it. But right now, you don't have the senior leadership, you don't have the rebounding, and you don't have the consistency from the bench unit, which are, as we kind of walked through a couple pods ago, those are one of those three things are generally what Izzo built his team around. They don't have any of those identities right now, and they just won't this year.
And along those lines, something we've talked about before, some of the lineups that Izzo put out in those final offensive possessions were
it's just brutal.
Questionable. He went with Goins late instead of Nick Ward, who was doing very well against Illinois. He had Nairn out there sometimes on the play that Bridges missed the layup. It was a difficult shot. He lost the ball and kind of
right.
But Goins and Nairn were on the floor there, and you were down 2. Like, how is that possibly your best offensive?
Yeah,
when you need that. And there was one where they were down 4 or 5, and they had the same thing. I think they had the same 2 guys in there, and Bridges just popped and hit a 3, and so you didn't think about it, but some strange lineups down the stretch.
Those are the guys. Those are the guys that are the minute stealers that you've been able to get by with, and we've talked about this in the past. The Matt Van Dykes, the Russell Birds, the Austin Thorntons, the Mike Keeblers. Those are the guys that have been able to steal them minutes here and there in the past, and that's been their role, and that's been great when you're stealing 5-6 minutes in the middle of the second half or early in the first, and you're able to sit one of your better players. That's great when you have that depth. There's just too many of those guys playing right now, and one that's kind of blowing my mind with just how bad he must be defensively, because I won't lie and say that I watch him all the time when he's running around on defense, but Josh Langford must be the worst defender that Izzo's ever had.
He's had several double in the post gives up an open 3 situations in the last few weeks.
He just is so unaware, because for him to not get these crunch time minutes when he is so obviously one of the best offensive options that they have, he's one of the only guys that can get his own shot. And so for him to not get minutes late in a close game and get benched for Matt McQuaid is it's saying something about his lack of progress.
I was just very surprised that 2 of probably your 3 best offensive playmakers in Nick Ward and Cassius Winston were not, or at least were. Just Nairn and Goins don't provide anything on offense, and it was
nothing at all.
One time Bridges hits a 3, and hey, Bridges hits that off balance, floater layup and ties the game. It's maybe not something anybody really thinks about, but it.
Definitely surprising.
Didn't really get those. Also, the reason I guess that Nairn took that last shot, I think Izzo had wanted to put Winston in, but because it was already, I think, a dead ball and it was a timeout after a timeout, he couldn't change it. He couldn't change the lineup, basically. So that's why he ended up with who is it? I forgot who passed to Nairn to set that up. But so, yeah, a game that came down to the end, they couldn't make the plays at the end. And that takes us to the Maryland game where couldn't make the play down at the end, and they lose by a 3-point. And MSU went the final, 3-4 minutes without scoring. Yeah. Ward fumbles the ball out of bounds in the final seconds, which some people didn't think he could have gotten it off. I think he would have gotten it off. But he panicked because he knew the clock, because Winston was kind of late getting it there, which has been a problem with Cassius Winston.
Right.
Every time the shot clock's winding down, he's got the ball in his hands, and something's got to happen. So, but I do think if Ward had held on to the ball, I do think he would have gotten it up, because he knew the clock. He knew where the clock was. He was going to hurry that. So they missed that opportunity, and then Melo Trimble just pulls up, hits the three. Some people are upset about Nairn about that. I don't really. That was a long shot, not a smart shot at all. You'll take a shot like that. He just happened to hit it. So I didn't think that was. I mean, and Nairn wasn't like sitting too far back either. It was a long shot. So that was my opinion of the final two plays there. Like I said, I didn't see much of the rest of the game. So give me your thoughts on that one.
Yeah, I think. Well, if you want, I'll just touch on those two real quick. I kind of agree with you on Ward. I don't really fault him for fumbling that pass, because, like you said, his eye had to be on the clock. He knew he had just about no time to get that up. So he was put in a bad position by Cassius Winston. He was put in a bad position by the lack of movement.
It was a great play. I mean, a great slip and great
pass.
Good pass together. Just the timing was, you had to get
right. So I don't pin that on, it's easy for you to, for someone to watch that play and say, oh, Ward fumbled the ball away, cost him the game. That's just not the case. I think if you rewind the play, they had plenty of time to get that pass down there sooner. I completely understand wanting to run the clock there and get it down as low as you can, but there is a line where you have to give your guy time to feel comfortable to get that shot up. So agree with you there. When it comes to the defense, I felt like I don't mind Melo Trimble taking that shot if it wasn't such an obvious shot. He was so comfortable taking it.
It's a very Melo Trimble shot.
You knew what he was going to do. And Tum Tum sprinted. The fact that he just turned around and ran to the 3-point line, Melo Trimble knew where he had to go to take that shot. He's a good enough 3-point shooter. His percentages are not as good as they were his freshman year, but he's a good enough 3-point shooter, and he is as he's as confident as anybody else in the Big Ten. He's made game-winning shots a couple other times in his career. He's on his home court. It's the last home game of the season. You know that's who they're going to in that moment.
I'll give you that. You had to know he was probably just going to pull up a hero ball shot.
You had to. Now, if he's taking that shot coming off a screen or something, then I'll let him take that all day. But he just walked right into it. And for a shooter, he knew where he was going to pull up the second he didn't turn around.
I don't think he walked. It was pretty quick. He didn't really even get a stop start. I didn't think. It was pretty. He was kind of jogging down I get what you're saying. You probably should have known that shot was coming, but
that's just a bit of awareness. I agree with you.
I still don't think it was
I'd rather give up that. I'd rather make him hit the hero ball shot than give up a layup or a drive into the lane where he can throw up an easier floater or dish it down to a big man or something. I think you live with the shot. I just thought the awareness going into it was kind of subpar. In terms of the rest of the game, this was every role player's worst road game, basically. Ward and Bridges.
Based on the box score, I gathered that from the box score.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, the box score really does tell. Sometimes the box score is misleading in basketball because guys have impacts that just don't show up in the stats, or they're a little bit better than really the numbers lay out. But this is, I'm looking at it right now. It's exactly how the game played out. It was Ward and Bridges attacking Maryland in the post and on the baseline. Not so much with Bridges, though. He put up 11 threes, and it was all of the bad tendencies that Michigan State has that they just all came to roost in one game. And they still found themselves only losing by 3, which sort of, when you consider how they didn't really turn the ball over that much. They only turned the ball over 8 times, which is what kept them in the game. I mean, that was it.
Which goes to show you that when the team doesn't turn the ball over, it can still figure out how to get things done.
Absolutely. But Bridges, threw a lot of these 3 points he threw up were the type of quick trigger. He had one really bad one down the stretch, and one of those, in that last 3.5 minute, 4 minute stretch where Michigan State just needed to really score 1 or 2 buckets to put it away, and they couldn't do it. He loves the quick trigger 3. and he's been shooting a great percentage. But again,
He
it's
is.
something we've talked about. I love when he gets shots in the rhythm of the offense, or when I hate the quick trigger early three in any possession, especially when he's taking it, because as we've talked about before, it's a dead horse at this point. But he's at his best. He's serving his best purpose for this team when he's going to the rack. But still still put up 18 and 8, and nobody else did anything off the bench. I mean, McQuaid had a classic 0 for 2, 0 for 1 from 3 performance. Cassius once again almost came to the rescue down the stretch. The offense looked so much more functional when he was in there. But then when you're going to get let's see here. You got 11 total points from 5 guards. That's just not going to cut it. It's just not going to cut it when McQuaid, Arns, Tum Tum, Alvin Ellis, and Langford are putting up a combined 11 points. You're just not going to win many games when you don't have the size to counteract your guards not being effective. So came down to it. It was a culmination of everything. And the frustrating part about this is that this team they're an inch away from turning that mental corner. It feels like they're so close. Like, at least these last 2 games were 3-point late losses and not blowouts. Like,
Yeah,
every other
that's an improvement from the previous 2 when they got lost by 20 and 30 points to Purdue and Michigan.
So I do think there was progress made in some of these areas. Again, only 8 turnovers in this game. Really held in there pretty well, but they gave up a lot of open threes. I
saw a tweet before the game. I think it was Solari on Izzo's pregame radio show, and he said the keys are 3-point defense, not turning the ball over, and I think rebounding or something like that. I'm like, those are the keys every
game. They actually did a pretty good job in those areas, all things considered. They only shot 32% from 3. They only turned the ball over 8 times, and they actually out-rebounded Maryland 37-33. So
what did Maryland shoot from 3?
They shot 32% from 3. Michigan State shot 38.1, and it was mostly because Bridges made 4, but he missed 7. So it was it didn't feel like a game that Michigan State really deserved to be in, quite honestly, in the second half. It felt like Maryland went on a big run when the Spartan bench was in early in the second half, and Izzo didn't call a timeout. They pulled ahead. Ward and Bridges carried them back as far as they could, but I think the lack of a third offensive option and the lack of another, big body down there to give the ball to and to get those garbage points came back to bite them. Although, like I said, there is progress, losing 2 games by a combined 6 points as opposed to 1 by 40.
Right, and I think, again, like I said at the beginning, there's only possibly 2 games left in the season. So as much as, Izzo's teams are always about growing throughout the year.
Right.
Do you think at this point that, 2 road losses where they played close, even if they played poorly, do you think that's worth anything at this point? Do you think? Because they are incredibly young, so theoretically it'll take them even longer to learn than other MSU teams have in the past. So
right.
I guess you could. It's possible that this could be some sort of.
I don't think
positive.
So. Normally, I would try to spin this in they're getting there, but like you said, that was the last game of the Big Ten season.
Yeah.
That's their 31st game of the year. I think it could pay dividends. It will inevitably pay dividends next year when these guys are sophomores and they're going into these tough road situations and they know, like, this team is better. We've got a more complete unit. We've been here before. We feel confident. I think it'll help the maturation process. But in terms of the here and now and moving forward into the Big Ten tournament, I don't really think so. They haven't answered the bell at all on a neutral floor or on the road so far this year. And I, as my predictions will tell everyone, I have always had that confidence that they at some point would turn the corner. But I think at this point it's too late to count on that happening. Part of it's the roster construction. I do think several of these games are games they would have won if they just had a guy who could defend the post.
Yeah.
If they had Gavin Schilling, I think 4 or 5 of these losses go the other way, just based on how he defends a pick and roll and getting garbage points down low. They've lost close games because they just can't hang on the glass and get those free buckets, or stop their opponents from doing the same thing. So I don't know how much of it is necessarily on the players themselves. Certainly some of it, but it's just a combination of every wrong factor has made this team, and yet they're still probably, hopefully, going to make the NCAA tournament. So I don't know if it doesn't pay dividends this year, though, to answer your question. I don't think.
That's what I was going to bring up next. It's not. I don't see this as a 2015 situation where they enter as a seven seed. Yeah. And they finally put it all together.
They don't have the hero. They don't have the hero.
They don't have right. They don't have. They are what they are. It's not a matter of the team coming together. It's just a matter of there are holes on this team that they cannot fill. And we said it at the very beginning that this team was going to struggle with big men because of what they have, because of the injuries to Schilling and Carter, and they have all year, and you can't change that. I mean, you can change the turnovers, I guess, and they did a little bit, but physically you are what you are. Nairn is not an offensive weapon. And you're relying on freshmen. So the flaws with this team have been the same flaws all year, and it's not like they can just go away by working harder or something like that. So that brings us, before getting the Big Ten tournament, bubble watch. MSU is 47th in the RPI. I'm looking at ESPN's RPI, so it's possible this is, RPIs are different in different places, but they have MSU at 47th in the country in RPI, one spot behind Michigan. MSU is 5-8 against RPI top 50 teams, and 11-12 against RPI top 100. There's no really bad losses except for the Northeastern game, but there aren't any great wins other than, Wichita State and the Minnesota games look better now than they did, and the Wisconsin Michigan looks better. The Wisconsin it's kind of slid a little bit, but it was still a marquee win, so to speak. Joe Lunardi, last I looked, had them among the last 4 buys, so out not in the last 4 in, but still in that last 8 in, and some people, like I think Graham Couch, seem to think that they are in no matter what. Graham keeps saying they're 6 and 7 versus the RPI top 50, so I'm wondering if someone has since slid out, and that's why. Oh, Northwestern slid out. They're 52 in RPI now, so that's no longer a top 50 win for MSU, which goes to show how arbitrary this is when you say top 50, top 100 wins because of that.
Changes all.
But, MSU's right there. They're okay right now, but right now it doesn't matter because if you lose to Penn State or Nebraska, you're going to probably sweat it out. Gun to my head, I'd say they're in if they lose to Penn State, Nebraska, but it's going to be close, and
not a sure thing by any stretch.
I don't think they're for sure in. So
no, I agree with you. If they lose that game, I think if they win, they're in. Right?
If you get one more win, you're in. Now MSU, assuming they don't win the Big Ten, they'll have 14 losses, which would tie the record for most losses for an at-large team to get in. However, Vanderbilt's another team on the bubble. They're 17-14 right now, so they presumably are going to end with 15 losses. So that record may end up getting broken, depending on how things shake out.
Right.
MSU's RPI strength schedule is 10th. Vanderbilt's is actually 3rd. So
I think that strength of schedule. I think 2 things are going to really factor into, even if they lose the game. I think 2 things factor into majorly in Michigan State's favor. One is that strength of schedule, because as Izzo does every year, they played an insane schedule. They just didn't manage to get that marquee win out of it this year.
On that schedule, I'll note, I heard some Izzo comments recently where I think he said today that he's maybe rethinking how he does things a little bit, which is kind of surprising from Izzo considering everything he's kind of built the program on. But also that, not to get into the whole thing, but he scheduled that assuming Deonte Davis would be back.
Right.
Which, again, I don't know why. He knows, obviously him and Deonte Davis know what's going on more than I would, but I would have always been very surprised that Izzo just assumed Davis was coming back. I mean, obviously he went second round, so maybe Izzo had different draft grades than everybody else, but everybody else had Deonte as possibly a lottery picker for sure, first round pick. So I don't know why he was surprised about that, but that's another thing to factor into why MSU scheduled the way they did.
Well, he might have felt good about Josh Jackson too at that point in time.
And he figured he was going to have Schilling and Carter.
Right.
Add Schilling, Carter, and Deonte Davis to this team. This is a really, really, really good team.
And that's just it. And that's just it. And it just speaks to the entire season where everything that this season, I think in like a sort of like a macro level, this doesn't signal anything about the program to me, the fact that they're having a bad season, because it is such a combination of injury, early departure, and just, I mean, really lack of development from some guys, and just a impossibly tough schedule in the non-con. That's why this happened. It's not because Izzo's lost his touch or Sparty's failing or any of the sky is falling stuff that just needs, it's not a conversation, but it should never become a conversation. So I don't think he'll really honestly rethink it all that much, especially when he sees the teams that he's got coming. And like you said, it's the foundation upon which he's built this program. And I think because of that, Michigan State is going to get a major benefit of the doubt when it comes to ranking them against the other bubble teams. I think all of that goodwill and all of that reputation that Izzo has built up throughout the years is he's gonna if he has to, he'll cash in all the chips as an 18-14 team, and that'll happen. And also the fact that their only bad loss it was without Miles Bridges, I think is a factor that not a lot of people are bringing up right now. That's a big deal.
Well, I'm sorry, you said you had two things. One was the schedule. What was the
second?
Other
was that Bridges was out in their own bad loss. I think that's a big deal.
I think there's a third, and it's something that MSU's typically not used to being a part of, but I think the brand.
You still there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I just lost you for a second.
Okay, yeah, I think the brand name is a factor. I think the fact that it's Tom Izzo, it's Michigan State. Push come to shove, are they gonna pick like an Illinois State over a Michigan State if it came down to it? I don't think they would. And MSU's been pushed out of BCS situations because of that in the past in football, but I think in this situation, I think people would find it difficult to keep an MSU out in a situation when it's that close. But again, if they lose to Penn State, Nebraska, it's going to be close, and I think MSU fans will be sweating out.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what you touched on with reputation is sort of what. By cashing on all the chips and all the goodwill, it's really that reputation. He's created such an amazing program, and they've done so many amazing things over the years, making 7 Final Fours under him and all of that. I think you're right. I think ultimately the reputation and those other factors would win out, but I'm with you, man. It's not going to be a fun Sunday for a lot until you see that name pop up on the TV. Hoping that it does. It's gonna be a stressful Sunday.
And something to add, Mark Hollis is the chair of the committee.
That's true.
But he I believe, I'm 99% sure, is required to recuse himself when it comes to stuff about Michigan State.
Sure.
So
still,
whether or not that,
not a bad guy to have in your
whether or not that has any factor, I don't think it hurts. I guess
no. I agree.
All right, so Big Ten tournament. Honestly, the story to me, and basically for Michigan State in this tournament is you're just looking to win a game. After that, if you do that, whatever. They're they're on the side of Purdue. If they happen to win, they play Minnesota, who they beat twice. And if they would happen to win that, you're probably playing Purdue, although Michigan could beat Purdue too, so who knows. But this isn't one of those years where I think MSU comes into the game motivated to, make amends for something or pay back or win a bit or win a championship of some sort. I think it's honestly just win a game, secure your spot in the NCAA tournament, and then just see what happens. But I will say, along those lines, it will be interesting to see how such a young team goes through the famous MSU overnight prep for the next day. So I think if they win a game or even two, that will be beneficial for the.
It's like bowl practice.
NCAA tournament if they get there. Right. They're not injured. Like it's not like you're trying to save guys for the tournament or something like that. It's so the more they'll have one. They'll have Penn State, Nebraska finish up, and I know they're prepping for both, but you'll kind of get maybe a half of that situation. And then if they can win that, you get a quick turnaround in Minnesota that can prepare you for if they make the NCAA tournament down the road. So I think that's a supplementary thing. What that will be interesting, but more than anything, I think it's just for MSU just win a game and
definitely
breathe a sigh of relief and then go wherever.
It is funny because, like you said, as fans of the school and alumni, like I'm usually looking 2 rounds ahead. Like, I'm trying to look at this path and chart out. Okay, you got winner of this game and then Minnesota and then probably Purdue. At this point, I am so concerned with a Wednesday game, it's unsettling. They have to get the one win.
You mean Thursday?
Oh, no, a Wednesday. I'm concerned with Penn State, Nebraska.
Oh, okay.
I'll be watching the 12-13 seed game seriously for the first time in my life. And, I think between the two, well, first of all, I completely agree. The objective is definitely just win a game. Win a game. Everything else is gravy because nothing else matters. So as long as you get in, it doesn't matter. You're going to get in as a 10 or a 9. I'm not worried about draw. I think at this point, it's just about literally getting into the tournament. So, but when you look at between these two teams, Penn State, Nebraska, kind of comparing the two, I think Michigan State would rather see Penn State. I think from like you said, a motivational standpoint with the young guys, that's a team you lost to. That's a team that sort of punked you a little bit. You went on the road and played in the Palestra. And just sort of got beat. And it was one of Bridges' first games back. I think Michigan State would match up a lot better with them in a neutral venue and with a fully healthy Bridges and a really just a little more mature, I guess, team. Nebraska, you played twice and they shot so terribly in the Breslin. They would come into that game with a little bit of vengeance on their mind. So I think from a mental standpoint, Michigan State would rather play Penn State, but either way, you just got to get the win. That's just my thought. You still there?
I'm sorry, I had my microphone muted for a second.
No worries.
In terms of the two teams, I think on the court, you'd rather have a Nebraska just because you handled them pretty good both times. And so I think there's what the matchup is. I think Penn State is more talented. I think Penn State does some things that could trouble MSU a little bit. Right. They're not super big, but I think they're just a more talented team that kind of hasn't played as well they should. They finished on 5 straight losses to end the year, while Nebraska enters on a 4-game losing streak. So something's got to give here.
Yeah,
but then you have the flip side, the mental side. Like you said, you've beaten Nebraska twice. Does a young team get a little overly cocky? Possibly. Do they look forward to a Penn State for a revenge type of thing? On the other hand, Nebraska believes it's playing for Tim Miles' job.
Yeah.
If they get past Penn State, maybe they're thinking a couple more wins we can save our coach's job. So I think there's several different mental storylines that could be going on there. So, I don't know. Both of these teams have come in really struggling. Actually, they played on Valentine's Day, and Penn State beat them by almost 20 at Nebraska. So, and that's the only time they met this year. So that game's at 4:30 Eastern on ESPN2 for those who are going to be watching that. Any type of preview? We talked about Nebraska like 2 weeks ago. It's a team that's very young, but it's a team that's full of freshmen, except for Ty Webster.
Yeah, they're guards. I mean, their guards are the ones that get their buckets. Shimunga is a big weapon for them down low. They've also got a 6'7", I can't remember his name, but he only played in the second game against Michigan State.
Ed Morrow?
Yes, exactly. It's not a bad team on paper, but like you said,
I think they've underachieved. Although, then again, they did win at Maryland, at Indiana, and beat Purdue at home.
Yeah.
So and beat Ohio State on the road. So
yeah, their peak is high. It's just they're very inconsistent.
It's been a weird team. They're not particularly great in anything except for offensive rebounding.
Morrow and Shimunga are both good rebounders. But if their guards aren't going, they're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah, Penn State's not very good offensively, but it's a pretty good defensive team.
Mm-hmm. They have a lot of length. Tony Carr made Big Ten All-Freshman. I mean, they've got a pretty solid squad.
They're led by Tony Carr and Lamar Stevens, who are also freshmen. Mike Watkins is also a freshman. And then Shep Garner.
Those are the Philly kids, right?
Yeah,
all the Philly guys that play at the Palestra.
I guess the key question is: are there any Washington D.C. kids?
Right.
Yeah. Roster?
We need to look at. I have a feeling there's none in Nebraska. But, maybe. Who knows, man? Maybe. I don't know. I don't know much about the hometown advantage here. So if they're both going slow, I guess from a matchup standpoint, I'd rather play Nebraska. But I think from a mental standpoint, I'd rather play Penn State. Either way, it's a team Michigan State should beat. They should win. So.
And for the record, Ken Palm has has Penn State by 72-70, 57% chance for Penn State. So it's pretty close. But like I said, both these teams come in on big losing streaks. Now, do you want to do a game by game pick here?
Sure. Yeah.
Why not? Just for the hell of it.
For fun.
So we'll start with the top half. Penn State, Nebraska.
I'm going with Penn State.
All right, you got Penn State. I will also pick Penn State. MSU, Nebraska. MSU, Penn State, sorry.
I will put my faith in the Spartans and say Michigan State gets that win and punches their ticket.
I will also say Michigan State. MSU, Minnesota.
Minnesota. I don't think Michigan State can beat them 3 times. I feel like they had a really hot – didn't they win like 8 games in a row in the second half of the Big Ten schedule? They had a really hot second half because they went on this huge losing streak.
Yes, they won 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then lost to Wisconsin.
Yeah, Richard Pitino won Big Ten Coach of the Year. So I think they would want to avenge their 2 losses to Michigan State. I don't know. I think you can only play with fire in that size for so long. So I would go with Minnesota.
I was going to say the same. 8-9 game on Thursday, Illinois, Michigan.
As much as I hate it, I'm picking Michigan. They've been hot. Derek Walton's been playing out of this world.
Illinois changed Michigan's season when one of those players said Michigan was a white-collar team or something like that. Michigan's been a different team since then. Michigan, Purdue.
I'd still go with Purdue, but that's going to be a better game if
Michigan beat them at Chrysler.
Right. Oh yeah, I think. Well, again, I think Purdue's just the better team. But when Michigan is shooting the lights out, I hate saying this, obviously, but like. That's a very good team. That's a team that could be anybody else in this conference. Yep. They could go on a hot streak. I would not be surprised if they went on a hot streak and won a couple games here. But I've also seen them go completely ice cold from the field and lose games they shouldn't lose. So I'd go with Purdue.
I'm going to go with Michigan there.
Okay. All right.
So that'll give us a Michigan-Minnesota semifinal or a Minnesota-Purdue semifinal.
Yeah.
Down Rutgers, Ohio State. I assume we're going to go with Ohio State there.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Ohio State.
Northwestern, Ohio State. Northwestern appears to be safe, and I'm going to guess a loss to Ohio State wouldn't hurt them that much. So they may be in the tournament, but maybe there's that extra motivation to make sure they get in.
Yeah,
Well,
I'd go with Northwestern there.
I would go. I'll go with North.
It's a close one.
I'm gonna go with Ohio State, but I think Northwestern will still get in anyway. It just feels like a very Northwestern thing.
You know what? You're right. That does feel like a very Northwestern loss and a very Ohio State win when it doesn't really matter. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
So who do you got in that one then?
I'll still take Northwestern because
Okay.
I want them. But
All right, Maryland versus Northwestern, Ohio State.
Maryland.
I will also go with Maryland. Indiana, Iowa. Man, what a fall for Indiana.
Yeah, no
Except
kidding.
for until they scored 90-something points in their last
Right.
until their last game. And that was something I was worried thinking about coming down the stretch was if MSU was going to somehow end up facing Indiana.
Yeah, that's a bad
would have been a
matchup.
difficult matchup. So Indiana, Iowa, who you got?
You know, I'm gonna go with Indiana, and I'm sure I'd regret it if I was actually putting money on this. I haven't watched Iowa a whole lot, to be completely honest. I know that Peter Jock's been really strong for them, and they had one of the Big Ten all-freshmen too. But I'm gonna go with Indiana. That game against Ohio State was crazy, 96-92. It was
in regulation.
Yeah, in college basketball, it was pretty wild.
I'm going to go Iowa. They've been playing pretty well recently, and they're kind of on the bubble. They got a lot to fight for. So
Yeah.
I'll go Iowa. So Wisconsin for you versus Indiana.
Oh man, I don't really like the way either of these teams are playing. I'll be bold and I'll say IU.
I'll say Iowa. I think Wisconsin.
So neither of us have any faith in Wisconsin.
So you've got.
I had Purdue, Minnesota. Mine's chalk. Mine's chalk.
So Purdue, Minnesota, you got.
Yeah, I would go with Purdue again. I think their bigs are just better than Minnesota's. Although Minnesota, you could make a pretty strong argument that they have guards that are on par with Purdue's. I like Minnesota. I don't know why, but
they're
a
pretty good team. They were losses to MSU were surprising.
Yeah, they were really, especially the first one. But not, you know what? No, I'm going to spice it up. I'm going to go with Minnesota.
I'll go with I had Michigan, Minnesota. I'll go with Michigan.
Oh man!
So that leaves on the bottom. You had Maryland, Indiana.
Yeah. God, I hate this bracket I've created.
That's not chalk there though.
No,
right?
No, you're right. I forgot. I picked Indiana. I'm riding the Hoosier train. Give me Indiana. At this point, I'm already too deep.
You're gonna save Tom Green's job.
Oh yeah. You know what? For the betterment of our rivalry with them, I am gonna save Tom Green's job.
I'll say Maryland beats Iowa, who will have to sweat it out on Selection Sunday. That gives you a final of
Minnesota, Indiana.
Minnesota, Indiana.
I'm riding the Gophers. I'm going with Minnesota.
That is a riveting.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm kind of hearing an echo on your end. I don't know if.
Sorry.
Come through some. No problem. We're almost done here. So I have a Michigan-Maryland final. I'll go with Maryland winning on home court. Wait, who did you pick?
I picked Minnesota.
You picked Minnesota. Okay. I'll pick Maryland to win in DC, kind of a home type of deal.
Like
that was going to be my next question as we kind of wrap this up. What do you think about it being all the way in Washington, D.C., which is right down the road from Maryland? But
yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of crazy. I'm not surprised at all. I mean, you had to see this coming from a mile away when they brought Maryland in. The whole reason they did it was to bring the New York and D.C. TV markets into the equation for the Big Ten. So
next year it's in Madison Square Garden.
Well, next year not only is it in Madison Square Garden, but it's a week before the Big East tournament. I think that is the absolute worst idea. Jim Delaney's had some bad ideas, and this is by far his worst. To stagger, you would have basically 2 weeks between games for whoever wins that tournament. And if you lose in the first round, well, I mean, if you lose in the first round, you're not making the tournament. But say one of the
you could
say the 5 seed next year, like Michigan State's on the bubble, and they lose that first game on a Thursday, you're literally sitting for 2 whole weeks before you play again. I think that's not only a disadvantage to the team, but the conference in general. I mean, they could all fall on their faces early just because of that.
Yeah, I don't. Wikipedia is only telling me the next 2, but I don't hate DC and New York City as once in a while. Maybe maybe once each every 6 years, and then the
Sure.
other 4 you throw in the Chicago's and Indianapolis's. I'm a huge fan of the Indianapolis tournament.
I was just going to say that.
Partly because I've talked, I think, on this podcast before about how much Indianapolis is an awesome sports event city.
100%.
Everything's walkable. It's just a really good city for that kind of stuff.
Good stadium. I mean, Bankers Life is an awesome place.
It's a cool basketball thing. When I was living up in Michigan, I could drive down to it easily. I'm not gonna lie that the fact that my wife's grandparents live in Indianapolis give us a place to stay makes it easier too.
Nice.
But just kind of the central location of it, I always loved covering. I've covered 3 or 4 Big Ten tournaments, and it's just super fun because you get in that location, you get crowds from just about everybody there, and it's always fun. Illinois always brings a big crowd. You know, Indiana, Purdue usually did, but they'd often lose quickly. So it was always kind of a fun setup they had here. I never went to it at the United Center. I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, I did. And just being a person in Chicago, it sounds great. Like you think Chicago is the nexus of the Big Ten and it's the capital, but anybody who's been to the UC will tell you that it is in a terrible location. Not like neighborhood wise or anything like that. There's plenty of stuff around it, but it's just set west, and getting east to west in Chicago is an absolute nightmare. North and south's not as bad with public transportation and everything. East to west is a nightmare. Parking is a disaster. You have to take public transportation, and there's nothing that's really like the closest Green Line stop, I think, is at least almost 3/4 of a mile away. The venue's fine. It's not nearly as homey and fun as
that's what I was gonna say. It's more cavernous.
Yeah.
Bankers Life or Conseco Fieldhouse is built like straight up.
Right. It's awesome
because they don't have a hockey team to play there. Also, it's bright. I'm not a fan of dark stadiums, which is kind of becoming a trend now again, like the Madison Square Garden style, where the idea is, all the lights are on the stage and it's like you're at a performance. I don't care. I want to see the crowd in the background going nuts and going bananas. It brings more of an energy watching it on TV. Whenever I watch a game at the United Center, the Big Ten tournament, I could never tell how many people were there. I could never tell where people were. It's always kind of dark. I mean, personally, watching the game, I prefer the bright stadiums because you can kind of see what's going on.
I would agree with you.
So that's how I would do it. Maybe 1 out of every 6 years or 2 out of every 6. You do New York, and then the other 2 in Indianapolis or Chicago. But I'll be curious to see the next time this happens again. Kind of on that note, ACC is going to, I think, Brooklyn this weekend.
Really? At the Barclays?
Yeah. Part of it's because they pulled out of New York City or pulled out of North Carolina because of the bathroom bill.
Oh, right. I forgot.
And they've got I think they did DC last year. I don't know what the future ones are, but curious to see where that one bounces around a little bit.
Oh, good for them for standing up for a social issue. That's admirable of them.
And it's kind of coming up down here in Texas because Texas now has its own similar bill, and the NFL said something. Governor responded, whole big deal. But so DC will be interesting. I think it'll be heavy Maryland. I think a place like New York City would be more balanced, but I think DC specifically is going to be heavy Maryland. Although there are a lot of Big Ten alum there, but I think there's kind of better spread out Big Ten alum.
Right. I think New York's gonna be a big Michigan influence. I can already tell you in 2018 because there's so many people from a bunch of the people I met when I went to Michigan State and went down to visit some friends in Ann Arbor. Were New York people, so I would bet in 2 years that's going to be a big
they played
big blue garden.
They've played there a few times in recent years or at Barclays and had pretty big crowds. They had a hockey game at Madison Square Garden, I think, last year. So
that's pretty cool.
So that's where that is with the bracket. Last thing to touch on, Nick Ward was not on the Big Ten All-Freshman team, which what do you think is the reason? Do you have a reason you think it happened?
Oversight. I mean, I honestly don't know. I can't put my finger on it besides maybe some people just didn't watch the game because he was so good. He won Big Ten Freshman of the Week 4 times,
Only behind Miles Bridges.
Right, exactly. Who won Freshman of the Year, as he should, and was second team All Big Ten, which he could have made an argument for first team, but I think he's okay there.
Yeah.
Freshman All American. I think I really can't come up with an excuse. Obviously, I'm stuttering here. Like he was top 5 in pretty much every freshman ranking between points, field goal percentage, block shots, rebounds. I mean, he was. I think one way it's the old MVP argument in a way. Is it player most important to your team, or is it the best overall player? Either way, I think Nick Ward belongs, but especially if you consider what he meant to the team. I mean, where would this team be without Nick Ward? It's crazy to think of where they would be. They'd be under 500, that's for sure. But I honestly couldn't believe it. I was shocked when I saw that he did.
My only thought was people forgot about him because of maybe his minutes, like the local reporters, maybe they covered a Michigan State game and Nick Ward fouled out early in the first half and didn't and wasn't toward the end. I don't know when the votes were, but I'm.
Does it matter?
I'm curious how the fact that MSU finished with 3 teams they hadn't played all year, how much that played into a role in terms of the beat writers in those towns. Maybe just they didn't see MSU very much and didn't know much about Nick Ward. I mean, that's
about falls on them, though, doesn't it, to go back and do your research? If you
sure. I'm just telling. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying I'm wondering if that was a factor. And by the time we got to the end of the season, maybe people had an idea of what they thought among certain people. And they didn't see Nick Ward till late, or the fact that he didn't play. He's only been playing 20-25 minutes a game because he's fouling out, and just in terms of what the people who vote see in person. I don't know. That's
maybe it's the haircut.
Yeah, maybe they think it's a different
people
person.
thought it was a different guy,
Yeah.
Nicholas Ward.
And I think Nick Ward's numbers always looked were more than maybe the eye test gave you. Like you rarely watched a game and thought Nick Ward is taking over.
Mm-hmm.
But partly because he didn't play all the time. And then you'd look at the box score, he had 18 points and 7 rebounds. I didn't quite realize that. So, I don't know. That's my only thoughts.
It's too bad. Although I'm excited now for the sophomore redemption tour, because I just hope he keeps that. If anything, as a Michigan State player, we love to play the disrespect card, and this just plays right into that old tired storyline. So hopefully we can capitalize on that.
Did I see quotes from Ward who seemed like he was kind of fired up about that? So maybe that's what they need. But if that leads to him being overly aggressive and committing a stupid foul and getting him put on the bench, then that's not worth it. Because that happens about every game. Happened in the Illinois game, and he had to go to the bench because he had a reach and foul. So, So I'm not quite sure why that happened, but that's what that is. So
that's crazy.
There's a chance that we may do a brief recap podcast after Big Ten tournament games. Depends if I have time or Austin has time or other people have times. But if not, we will next talk to you probably after Selection Sunday, right?
Yeah, I would think so. Probably Monday.
So perhaps by the next time you hear us, either MSU's streak will continue or it'll be done. And
we'll be really happy or really sad. It'll be one or the other. It'll
be we'll see which way that goes. So I did not think this podcast was going to stretch as long as it did, but we always seem to stretch it out and talk about stuff. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. Make sure you listen, subscribe. Feedback's always appreciated. On Twitter, I'm at Chris Vannini. He's at AC Smith06. Is that the only colors? Make sure you're reading Austin's great preview stuff, especially for this week. Always got a lot of good stuff up there. Thanks, guys, for listening, and we will talk to you guys next week. See you.